Well, it's a horse race, but it changes constantly. But it's an interesting snapshot for the time being because for now, Senator Elizabeth Warren is gaining traction, a lot of traction. And this after promising big spending, but more the details behind how she would pay for that spending. You would agree or disagree with her math or even her approach, but it seems to be resonated with Democratic voters. To former Hillary Clinton campaign finance team member Blake Rutherford, Independent Women's Forum Director of Policy, Hadley Heath Manning, and New York City Council minority whip Republican Joe Borelli. Blake, if I can begin with you, is it your sense that the reason why someone like Elizabeth Warren is registering is she's not only talking the talk, but she's talking about how she'll pay for that talk?
I think that's right, Neil. I mean, there's a certain attractiveness at this stage of the game for big ideas, and her mantra, I've got a plan for that landed her on the cover of Time magazine, is catchy, and so I think it's been able to both resonate with a core base of the Democratic Party, but also, as we've seen over the course of the last week, really start to gain traction with new voters. She's siphoning off, it appears to be, voters both from Bernie Sanders and from Joe Biden.
Looking at all of this and her recent polls, she has been having the biggest surge right now, Hadley. Now, that could change. But the only thing I can get at is that she has been relentless in these details, relentless in being the wonk and embracing the wonk, even out wonking Bernie Sanders, no doubt, someone she's admired, but she seems to have evolved for the time being as the younger face of his same message. How do you describe that?
Right, and there are so many candidates in the field. We ought to remind ourselves there's really not that many lanes in the field, and that's one reason why Joe Biden continues to be top of mind. He's sort of attracting more moderate Democrat voters, the center-left lane, if you will. Bernie Sanders has always had his own lane as the Democratic socialist. But what Elizabeth Warren is doing very successfully, I think, right now and gaining momentum for achieving a policy agenda that could unite the Democratic Party, maybe siphoning off some of the more moderate support from Joe Biden. And I think the economic patriotism agenda is a pretty transparent attempt to appeal to some voters who might otherwise vote for President Trump in his reelection bid, and also appealing to the crowd that is further to the left, might support Senator Sanders. When he gave his speech this week about democratic socialism, if you listened, it was a very ideological speech, very ivory tower about opposing oligarchy and authoritarianism. But Elizabeth Warren is, to her credit, getting into the weeds on the policy details.
Joe Borelli, the president is fond of making fun of her, Pocahontas, and all the other stuff. So he doesn't seem to fret her nearly as much as it would appear, let's say, a Joe Biden, who he trails in some national polls by double digits. He trails, I think, Elizabeth Warren by 3 or 4 in some. So maybe he is just dismissing her out of hand. What do you think of that?
I don't actually think that would be the right move. She is someone who has now begun to differentiate herself from sort of the other candidates that I would put maybe in a second tier, not Joe Biden, not Bernie Sanders. And she's doing that by sort of adopting, in some respects, a populist message and trying to appeal to a broader swath of the population. The biggest criticism that she has is that she's not unique in. I mean, most liberals can't figure out how they're going to pay for some of the bright-eyed and bushy-tailed spending programs they want to come up with. But at least she is one of the few candidates in that second tier who's actually trying to talk about policy and not just going after Trump on impeachment and other things like that.
That's a very good point. And Blake, something you touched on as well. Now, a lot of people who she targets to pay for that, upper 2%, that seems to be a theme that comes up in paying for college debt and to help people get health care for all or provide Medicare for all. It's the rich who she goes after. Whether that math ultimately does work out is anyone's guess, but does that boomerang on her?
I don't think so in a Democratic primary, Neil. I mean, she's not going to struggle by attacking the ultra-wealthy, or at least encouraging that the ultra-wealthy pay a little bit more for something that is popular, like lowering the cost of college or making health care more affordable, as we saw with Howard Schultz's, just ill-begotten, nonsensical presidential campaign. The second he pushed back against that, he was all but dead in the water, and now I think that campaign has finally come to its end, fortunately. So I don't think it's going to boomerang on her in a Democratic primary. I do think that again, what the Democratic Party has to be careful of is not tacking so far to the left to win that they can't come back to the middle and capture, again, some of those Obama voters who then changed and voted for Trump, which is critical, suburban women, which is going to be critical, and voters in the Rust Belt, which is going to be critical if the Democrats are going to win. So that's the biggest problem here, and I think that's one of the concerns about Elizabeth Warren. I will say I think she is tempering that considerably by putting her ideas out there and putting her plans out there for the public to digest.
You know, Hadley, there's something we said, too, about Joe Biden sort of sitting on a lead, playing it cautiously, playing it conservatively. I mean, just the conduct conservatively, not politically. And he might regret that. What do you think?
Well, I think that there's a warning both for Joe Biden and eventually for President Trump in this recent momentum surge for Elizabeth Warren. And that is, when we're talking about these policy ideas, the debate between the right and left tends to be, here's Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, universal child care, you name it. And critics of that plan say, well, how are you going to pay for it? But if she provides the details about how to pay for it, then we need to really address the other arguments about why it might not be best for government to be in charge of raising children from birth through age 5 or providing health care for everyone, that replacing the options that we have in a private marketplace with one centralized government plan is ultimately going to result in limited access or lower quality when it comes to the things that we care about. So I think she's driving the policy debate right now, but it's certainly something for other candidates like Joe Biden and eventually President Trump to be thinking about, that the counter message cannot simply be about money, but it has to be about the benefits of providing people with greater choice rather than one centralized government option.
That's a good point. And, Joe, I have to wonder, if I'm President Trump and I'm overseeing an economy that, you could go back and forth on how great economy is, but it's certainly strong right now. Key demographics all looking at record low unemployment, and he's trailing nationally. Now, that polls change, and they might not adequately or even accurately reflect what's really going on. But you could make a convincing argument the president should be up double digits, and he's not.
Yeah, I mean, the president was also losing just about every poll before he actually won the White House and won the presidency in 2016. And I think we're going to see a lot of the polls change after we watch this greatest hits of the Rat Pack debate, where all the candidates are trying to sing the greatest hits. Tax the rich, ban the cars, Medicare for all. This is really going to be, in my opinion, Joe Biden's big moment to either gain or lose. And if he comes out there and he's apologizing for all of his past votes, his past mistakes, and people are just thinking of him in the past, they're not going to see him as the future of the Democratic Party, which is a problem that he's already been, walking that fine line.
Joe, final word. Hadley, want to thank you. Blake, thank you very much for coming. Hope you all have a great weekend.